Today, we're going to talk about something that is absolutely at the heart of medical ethics: free and informed consent. And to really get our heads around it, we're going to walk through this powerful hypothetical story that shows exactly why this principle is so incredibly important. All right, so picture this. Our story centers on a 62-year-old woman who's just received a very serious diagnosis. She's told by her doctors that she needs an operation and that it's absolutely necessary. But what happens next is something she never, ever could have prepared for. After the surgery, she wakes up to an unexpected amputation. So, how on earth does something like that happen? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dig into. Okay, so let's dive right into this hypothetical case. We're going to break it down to see where the communication failed so critically and what it teaches all of us about patients' rights. So here's the setup. The patient is dealing with diabetes, and it's led to a very serious condition: gangrene on her left foot. She's admitted to a hospital's charity ward. She's told she needs an operation, and, she readily agrees to it. And this brings us right to the heart of the matter. Quote, "After the operation, she was surprised to find out that her left foot was partially amputated." That one word right there, surprised, tells you everything. It's a huge red flag that there was a massive disconnect between what she thought was happening and what actually did. Right. So, how do you get to a point where a patient is surprised by an amputation? Let's try to pinpoint exactly where that failure in communication happened. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. The hospital claimed they explained what the operation would involve, but they later admitted that the patient wasn't fully rested when they talked to her and that the whole explanation was done in a rush. You can see the huge gap between what they said they did and what really happened. And her response to all this is so telling. When they were rushing through the explanation, she simply said she would agree to whatever the doctor decided. Now, on the surface, that might sound like trust, but in the world of medical ethics, that is a massive red flag. It shows she wasn't really an active participant in the decision at all. And this whole messy, hypothetical situation brings us to the most important question of all. What should we keep in mind when explaining a medical procedure to a patient? How do we make sure something like this never, ever happens? The answer? Well, it all comes down to something called the ethical mandate. This is the core principle that should be at the very heart of all patient care. And that principle is free and informed consent. Basically, it means that a medical procedure should only be done with the patient's willing and knowledgeable permission. And trust me, those two words are everything here. Okay, so let's tackle that first word, informed. What does a patient really have a right to know before they can make a genuinely knowledgeable decision? Well, there are 4 key pillars here. To be truly informed, a patient has to understand the procedure's purpose. Like, why are we even doing this? They need to know the risks and the benefits. What could go wrong? What could go right? They have to know about any alternative procedures. And finally, what are the hoped-for results? Just saying, "we need to operate," doesn't even come close. But here's the thing. Just dumping a long list of facts and figures on a patient, that's not the whole story. Information by itself is not enough. And that brings us to the other, maybe even trickier half of this whole equation, the free part. This is all about making sure the patient's choice is truly their own, that it's completely voluntary. For consent to actually be free, 2 conditions are absolutely vital. First, comprehension. The patient has to actually get it, They have to understand the information, and you have to consider their education, their emotional state. Remember our patient who wasn't fully rested? And second, freedom. The decision has to be made without any undue pressure. And that pressure, man, it can come from anywhere. It could be from well-meaning family members, from healthcare workers who have that classic doctor knows best attitude, or even from insurance companies or employers. Real freedom means the patient's voice is the only one that truly matters in that moment. So, after going through this story and all these principles, let's bring it all home. Why does this actually matter so much? Not just in some hypothetical case, but for every single one of us in the real world. Here's the bottom line. Free and informed consent isn't just some legal checkbox to tick off. It's about fundamental respect for a person's autonomy and dignity, their right to control what happens to their own body. It empowers all of us to take charge of our own health. And when you get that right, it builds the trust that is absolutely essential between a patient and a doctor. And that brings us to our final thought. This principle puts a huge responsibility on doctors and hospitals, for sure. But it also gives you, the patient, incredible power. So we want to leave you with this question. The next time you or someone you love is facing a medical decision, are you prepared to ask the right questions to make sure your consent is truly free and truly informed?